For those of you who don't know, I actually grew up in the LA area, and like the rest of the world, I've been closely following the fires that are happening in LA even as I speak right now. This one, by the way, in particular, literally hits close to home. Now, I keep thinking about the homes that have been lost, the people that have perished, and the survivors that are going through an unimaginable pain of the total loss of everything. It really just is unfathomable. But sometimes we forget to think about the animals that have been suffering too. Now, I'm not just talking about the pets, I'm talking about the wildlife too. Everything and everyone has been affected by this horrible situation. The nature, the animals, the people, the homes, not the houses, the homes, they're just memories now. And it's just so unimaginable if you're not living through it. In today's episode, Robin Keats of Paws of War, he joins me. Now, Paws of War has really stepped up. They have taken on the feat of helping all the animals. Not only are they making sure that they have food and water, but think about this one. Smoke inhalation, not for the yous and me's, the animals. They have the same problems that we do. So Paws of War has made custom oxygen masks for the first responders to be able to take care of the animals as well. So our friends, our best friends, and our wild friends are also getting the special care that they need. This episode is eye-opening and thought-provoking. Robin goes into the detail of how Paws of War is stepping up and doing whatever they can to help our four-legged friends. It's really about being present when people and animals are in need, and it just may make you think outside of the box when you hear of literally any disaster and broaden your awareness of who and what is affected. Lastly, I want to give a quick thank you to Paws of War and all the others that are helping to making these situations just a little bit less painful.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. I'm really glad to have you guys here today. My guest is Robin Keats. Now, Robin has been in the trenches helping animals affected by the LA fires. His organization, Paws of War, are doing some really amazing things, and Robin's here to tell their story. He's going to tell you his background, what they do, and they're doing some crazy things. And I'm sure for us that don't live in LA and for in LA, we want to hear all the stories. So, hey, Robin, thanks so much for joining. I know you're real busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Listen, we really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out and are indebted to you to helping in that cause. I'm a volunteer with Paws of War and on their board of directors, but the organization is an amazing East Coast based, but with national reach and even international reach in rescuing animals. Always our first cause from Ukraine to the Middle East, and now very much focused on rescuing the animals that are victimized by LA fires.
Oh, I mean, the whole story is crazy. One of the things I was thinking about this last night after we had talked, we often think about our homes, we think about ourselves, but we also sometimes, not necessarily the animals that are really close with us, or your Fido or whoever that is, but there's a lot of other animals that are affected by this as well. I mean, you've got all the wildlife in LA, which if you don't live in LA, you realize there's coyotes and a bunch of things, cougars, crazy things. So there's a lot of other things that have been affected. And I think it's great to have you on to talk about everything you're doing. We're taking care of every living being that you possibly can, which is great.
Exactly. One of the things that we're really involved right now with two big initiatives, and I'll break them down. But the first one is setting up feeding and watering stations, and these are made out of PVC pipe. We've used them in the Ukraine, and they've been used in different parts of the world. And we're setting them up in the fire zones for animals that were somehow left behind, pets, dogs, and cats that people didn't abandon, but maybe just couldn't gather up in their incredible rush to avoid being in the inferno themselves. Or dogs that, a cat that just ran. That's what happens with cats sometimes, as well as the wildlife that's out there. But what we're finding and what we maybe not so much finding, but realizing is that these stations are stopping the incredible onslaught of death that's caused by these fires because these animals would be starving to death if they didn't have, or thirsting to death if they didn't have these automatic feeders set up. So,
I want to talk a little bit more about Paws of War's background and really dig into the LA fire.
mhm,
So everybody understands you guys. I know you briefly went over that. You guys have been around for, I guess, this is your 11th year.
right.
So let's talk a little bit about everything that Paws of Wars does. I know they work with veterans, they work with all kinds of stuff. Let's a little get a backstory so everybody understands how dedicated you guys really are and what a great organization you are. And then we'll get into LA because obviously the LA thing is right on top of everybody's mind, but they should know your guys' expertise as well.
Yeah, our original mission, and it's still a primary mission, is to alleviate the suffering of veterans and first responders and their families, particularly vets with invisible wounds like PTSD, by providing them with service dogs that are not just companions, but they're catalysts for healing. So we've been rescuing and rehabilitating dogs and cats in dire straits, getting them from the brink of despair and giving them a new chance. From war-torn regions. Soldiers and sailors and Marines and Air Force will be stationed overseas and, get bonded with an animal that they meet there. It becomes their companion. It's often, in a sense, they're therapy dogs, but they're not. These are just animals that they've befriended. They're their pets. When they get redeployed, the military doesn't take them with them. So we go and get these animals and reunite them. We work with them and get them back to the people who first rescued them to begin with. And then we provide lifetime care for retired military working dogs. We have a therapy dog program for vets and seniors, emergency foster for hospitalized vets, we do disaster response and rescue. We do so much more, including Ukrainian animal rescue and care. So we we are all over the place, and hopefully you can't be in too many places doing too much all at the same time.
Well, what I love about you guys have a big heart. One of the cool things that I really like is when you talk about somebody, a vet, no matter what part of the world they are, and you get this animal that you basically becomes your best friend or your part of your family at this point. And when you're in the military, you go with what the military says, and if they send you back home, it's a lot of these people don't have a lot of money or whatever because it's expensive to get them back to you. If you want to bring them back to the US, there's a lot more to go through it, and the fact that you guys are doing that I think is amazing.
That's it's really really difficult, but thank God we've got an incredible staff and an amazing group of volunteers that are just so devoted to the cause. And the reward is so huge in seeing when we see a reunification of one of these animals with one of the vets that we bring back, and it could be months later. It is so heart wrenching and so gratifying that
Yeah.
you just can't give enough. So they are our motivation and our reward.
Well, the funny things I always say, it brings tears to your eyes, but it's tears of joy, it's not tears of sadness.
Exactly.
And that's a cool thing. What's funny is, we didn't talk about this, but when you talk about, and I know you guys are doing a lot of stuff with military and PTSD and all that, but I don't, we haven't really touched on this, but in the last, I think it's now 12 years that animals are being diagnosed with PTSD too.
Indeed. Indeed.
You guys are doing that, which is awesome.
They're man's best friend, and that comes with benefits and unfortunately some of the deficits as well. Yeah, they
Well, what we always hear about, like during the fireworks, right? So all the animals freak out. Well, imagine, for the guys listening to that, but just imagine being in a war zone where bombs are going off, guns, and people are getting hurt. They're affected by that too. You never really, I mean, if you take a step back, it's not that people aren't trying to be aware. When you actually look at it, a deeper picture, of course they're aware of that, which is crazy.
They are. My family has it's my son's dog. It's a family dog. It's a rescue Dobie. We only get rescues. And this dog had been, not at war, but victimized by some previous owner that let a choke collar grow into its neck. So it had to be operated on to pull the
Ooh.
collar out. And this is the most loving, caring, affectionate dog in the entire world. So the gratitude, people say that we anthropomorphize these animals and make them human. I don't know if I believe in that. I believe these animals really feel that gratitude and show it every day.
Oh, they do. I mean, as you know, I always tell people, it's not that I'm clueless, but I sometimes just don't pay attention as much as I should. And when you start actually taking a step back and you look at it from a different perspective, of course, they appreciate that. I mean, everybody, kindness begets kindness at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I like, when I was going through your guys' website and doing a little bit more research and articles and stuff like that, what I love about what you guys do, I mean, you absolutely take care of all the members as well, but you also do the first responders. You're also helping them as well. I want to talk a little bit about that. Everybody, I mean, we can talk about all three of them, but let's talk about first responders, because right now our first responders are the ones in the front line in all the fires out there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've been hitting. Aside from the fire stations, we have been distributing oxygen masks for animals to fire stations all across LA, from Marina Del Rey to Watts, from East LA to Santa Clarita, where fires burst out last night.
Right.
Downtown, you name it, from rich area to poor area, makes no difference. We called a lot of these stations and said, "Do you have need of these masks?" And they all made the same. They all said that's pretty much the same thing. If we have the masks, they're incredibly antiquated, and we can't get spare parts for it. And we don't even know that they work so well anymore, and there's very few of them, or we don't have them at all. Um, we brought them to these fire stations, giving two each to maybe 20 or so of them. And a few days ago, we were up in the Santa Clarita area, where there is the headquarters for 16 battalions of EMS units. We brought them 16 masks. The captain there, Kevin Davis, said he has been trying to get this done for a long time. There's never enough funds. Was so grateful for this. He pointed out, it's not just the wildfires. These guys respond to a house fire. He pointed out that a few weeks ago, there was a house fire in the Santa Clarita area. Somebody who was hoarding cats had a few dogs, and they had to use human masks to save some of the cats. It took longer. They didn't have enough. If they had had these, it would have been so much quicker. So while we are responding to them out of the instigation and the inspiration of the fires, it was an immediate demand, we realized there's a huge need for these things, not just in LA, but we want to get one of these or a couple of these masks to every fire station in the state if we can. And it should be probably across the country.
Well, it's one of those things, it's funny is, of course, I paid more attention to it when we were talking about being on the show, but, just like you and I get smoke inhalation, right? Animals get the same thing. And if you don't have anything to give them, they're the ones that are going to suffer from it, while we're got an oxygen max on ourselves. I think I never even thought about it, but it's logical, makes all the sense in the world.
And these kits come in with three different masks with three different sizes, so it can fit a cat or a small dog, medium-sized dog, a larger dog. It's a simple piece of apparatus. It comes with the tubing. They just hook it up to their tank. But there's a little poem by a poet named William Carlos Williams that said, "So much depends on the red wheelbarrow by the white barn," meaning sometimes it takes the littlest thing, so much can depend on it. And this is a great example. It's a little piece of plastic and some tubing, but it makes a difference between life and death. And there's no reason in the world why these things shouldn't be out there and supplied to every fire station that there is, any EMS unit.
You got a little Keats in you. For you guys who didn't hear his last name is Keats. I had to throw that in. It's just my personality. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit more of what you guys have done, what you've seen. For us, for everybody listening, I grew up in LA, so there's a lot of friends and family that are involved, that are been affected by this. But we're just seeing what's in the news. You're on the ground. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And let's just bounce. We're going to go all over the place because I want to get in some of your background as well, and a little bit more into Paws of War too.
Sure. Right now I'm in the Brentwood area, and our particular home is in the area that was a voluntary evacuation, but we were right on the edge of the mandatory evacuation. So it was touch and go. We did evacuate for a week, got our animals and relocated. And once we thought it was okay, we left our animals and my wife in safety. My son, who is a major volunteer for Paws of War as well, Zachary Keats, he also happens to be a leads dog packs and hikes throughout the Santa Monica Mountains. Probably knows the trails that went on fire better than probably anybody in LA. He, just coincidentally, this is a little personal anecdote, but I think it'll give you.
No, I want that kind of stuff.
So he happened to be house sitting the night before the fires in Pacific Palisades. And he was going to be hiking that dog and most of his dogs that he takes on these pack hikes, anywhere from 8 to 10 to sometimes 12 animals, depending on the day, and mostly all out of the Palisades. Uh, he left in the morning and went to pick up the other dogs, and this was before we had news of the fire, and was headed for the very trail where they believe the Palisades fire began. As he's heading there, people warned him and said, "There's smoke. It looks like a fire has broken out there. Don't go, turn around." And being pretty astute, he took his dogs to a public park far from that area, staged the dogs, got them into safety, found that there were other dog hikers and walkers doing the same. Almost all of the houses that those dogs lived in were burned to the ground. Just by serendipity on that day, had he not been there and taken on those dogs, they'd have died. So it's an amazing story. And, by the end of that day, he kept them in the park all day. He was redistributing dogs to hotels and Airbnbs and evacuation centers and wherever these people managed to go. They had nowhere to go. Their houses were lost. Everything was lost except their animals. So the gratitude and the emotion of these people is so palpable. And it is only not that he needed any more motivation at all to do the kind of work that he does, because he's huge hearted, but he's just driven to save everything that he can. So
Now, how old is he?
he is 41.
41. Well, he's going to live with this memory for the rest of his life. Can you imagine? I happen to be at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. It's awesome.
Yeah, had he overslept, he'd have died. The animals would have died, but he's not an oversleep. He's got his responsibility. It was a matter of, if you believe in divine intervention, it was divine intervention. If you believe in luck, it was luck, serendipity, whatever you might want to call it. Just very, very thankful that it happened the way it did that way. Horrible losses, but at least those animals have been saved.
I believe in all three of them, actually.
So, place your bet. Just keep putting it on everything, because you don't know which one's going to come through for you.
It's probably a little bit of all.
Yeah.
It's probably what it was. Exactly it. So let's get back to actually, you know what? Before we go there, can you? I know you're in the entertainment industry. Let's talk a little bit about you, and then let's get back, because then let's get into real big details of the feeding and water stations. But your background, you're in the entertainment industry, you're a writer, director, and all this stuff. Can we talk a little bit about you so we can introduce
Yeah.
you to everybody else?
I am. I've got like a dual career kind of thing going. I create, produce, sometimes write, or sometimes all three at the same time, nonfiction programming for TV, stuff for like History Channel, Discovery Channel, Travel Channel kind of stuff. So I'm very involved in that. That, as you know, with the strikes and the change into streaming and that whole industry's fallen out. I'm also a print journalist, both a writer and an editor. So, my career has taken me from the New Yorker to Esquire to GQ to a lot of other magazines, a few nonfiction books, and currently, at least for the past 12 years, I'm a contributing writer to UCLA publications for their general magazine, writing on everything from brain mapping to profiles of geniuses. A contributing writer to U Magazine, which is the magazine of the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine, for which I write profiles of doctors that do really fascinating things outside of the office. And currently, I'm also the editor of Blue Door Magazine, which is a wonderful magazine for coastal Orange County, although it's got a larger imprint on lifestyle and travel and design and art and just wonderful things. So I'm always juggling a lot of projects at the same time.
So two things. One is as I mentioned, I grew up in LA. one of my closest friend, his older sister, worked in the entertainment industry, and she worked in the music industry, and she actually left Sony to come out to LA, even though she grew up there, to work for Geffen in his entertainment as well as his music side. She worked with David Geffen for a long time. That's one thing. The second thing is, given the fact you're a writer and you do a lot of nonfiction, are you taking a lot of notes right now? I'll bet you got some ideas.
Yes, and I'm old school, so I've got spiral notebooks that then make it to the computer, or if I'm in a rush, I go straight to the computer. But somehow I still have that connection between pen and paper, and then the paper to the computer screen. It gives me some pause and time to reflect on what I wrote, and then I can make revisions. So I think the art of life is reinvention, and the art of writing is rewriting.
So this is funny. So I buy when school starts every year, I go buy a bunch of spiral notebooks for like $1. And literally the notes I have for today is I'm sitting looking at a spiral notebook. I swear to God.
Well, we are mirror images because I've got one right on my desk in front of me.
So if we're mirror images, you're a happy dummy like I am. Then that's what it is.
Well,
That's what we are.
I like my bullet points in my notes, so I'm not at a loss for words.
I'm never at a loss for words, but the words I say, everybody's at a loss when they hear it. So anyways.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
So let's get back to what you guys are doing. I wanted to introduce you to that, and maybe we finish up. We'll talk a little bit more about some more details on Paws of War. So what you guys saw the need, and you've done all kinds of disaster. You guys were involved with North Carolina as well, right?
Oh yeah, if there is a hurricane, a flood, you name the disaster, we are there. We've done a lot, and out of Texas and Florida over the years, we've sent people down. You'll see our people on boats on flooded ranch land, paddling and roping cattle and bringing them saving them from drowning to the work that we're doing here in LA, which is, we may have a coyote feeding where we left it out for a cat, but as long as we're saving a life, we're meeting our mission.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I'm looking at my spiral notebook as we see right now. This is a note I made. There's a quote that you guys have on your website that I really liked, and it goes like this. This is why I got to read it. It says, "A kind gesture can reach a wound that only compassion can heal." And I thought it was a really very pointed to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and again, that's why I had to read it, because it's too good for me to try to remember it. So let's get to you guys. Let's get back to LA, because that's the topic really that we should be talking about. So talk a little. I know you're talking about PVC, but let's talk. And how many stations have you got? And then let's get in more detail exactly what they're doing and where they are as well.
Yeah, we've finished a couple of days ago building 60, at least 60. There's probably more already built. Feeding and watering stations. And it's such a simple thing to do in a sense, where you take PVC pipe, you cut it down into lengths, you put those U joints or angled 45-degree, I don't know what you call them, and you hook them. Elbows, thank you. To it, glue it, seal it, and by gravity, if you're using kibble, we've got a feeder.
Right.
If by inverting it, filling it with water from the bottom, we have a vacuum that forms a watering station. And then we have people to go out to monitor them to make sure that the water has been refilled, that there's still food or needs a refilling of the kibble in it. And, we're encountering a little bit of an issue, which is obviously understandable, and we're working around that and succeeding. But, these are really toxic zones where the fires have been, especially I'm close to the Palisades, so I'm more aware of what we're doing right now in the Palisades area. So it's difficult to get in. We have gotten in. We got in immediately. I'm not sure how many we have set up there yet, but it's in the process. There are stations already set up and more on the way.
So when you set up the stations, are they right in the heart of the burn area, or is it just on the outside of it? I mean, I'm trying to visualize it.
Yeah, everywhere we can get in town,
Right.
on the edges. If we can get up on the fire roads, as time goes on and the air clears, and people are starting to be let in. If you're a resident, for a while, rescuers were allowed in, animal rescuers. Then there was a stop on it. When there's a crisis like
Sure.
it's a really, really fluid situation. But now that it's been a little bit of time, at least here locally, the air's a little clearer. We're able to do a lot more. But we've been feeding and watering and monitoring. So
So how do you monitor? Do you just check on it, or do you have some kind of system to do that?
yeah, we send volunteers out. We've been working also with a wonderful group of people from an organization called Social Compassion in Legislation, which is helping with their volunteers. We're seeing incredible synergy between rescue groups and helping one another out. And this could be independent animal transporters. For example, just yesterday, we needed to get some equipment out of Riverside County and brought here. Now, all our main volunteers were busy doing all these other things. We needed a transporter. Through one connection to another, my son somehow managed to get to, I believe his name is Randy Hill from Sha-Na-Na, who volunteered to go drive to Riverside County and pick up this equipment. And it's astounding. In times of tragedy, sometimes the best of people come out. And that's another reward all by itself.
Well, yeah, the humanity survives.
Randy Young, I believe his name is.
So, for you guys that are listening that don't know LA, Riverside County coming to where you guys are is probably an hour and a half drive if there's no traffic.
Without traffic, it's a good
Yeah,
2 hours and something with even moderate traffic half the time.
right. It's pretty crazy. So, like when these feeders, and I'm kind of visualizing what you're doing. So, does it hold like how many? Does it pounds that it holds?
That's a good question. We haven't measured, but they're between 4 and 5 feet in length, so
Right,
it's a good bit. It's enough, certainly. Depending on the need and how many animals come up to it. Who knows how many animals fled out of there? But and we don't know how many might be from domestic animals that were somehow tragically left behind and managed to survive, or wildlife. LA hills aren't nearly as filled with wildlife as they once were,
right.
but there are still some deer. There's definitely coyote. There was an incident the other day of a mountain lion. This is during the height of the fire in the Palisades,
Right.
tracking down, I think, with its cub down Pacific Coast Highway.
Well, because I know the mountain lions are over towards Riverside and that up in those hills. I didn't know they were that close into town too.
We have a few, but these fires are just driving them.
Of course.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm personally worried about, and I know other people are, is right after the Palisades fire, there was a spot fire in Runyon Canyon above West Hollywood. Then there's the Hughes fire, which is going on now up by Castaic. Now today, a small one has burst out near the Sepulveda Pass. My big fear is when those winds were howling and they were hurricane force winds, the idea of these fires joining forces, meeting each other and being
Right.
one giant tsunami of flames just wiping out big parts of LA. I mean, it did, but it could go even further. And is that danger gone? I don't really think so. If these winds come back, is that possible? Yeah. While my family and we're in a voluntary evacuation zone. My son went up to the roof of our condominium building and saw burnt leaves and ashes all around the ground we're on the ground floor of from the fires, and saying this is way too close. So one of those embers can carry for a mile,
Right.
and
The wind.
that's the real danger. So we can't let our guard down. Was this fire avoidable? Given the winds, the dry conditions, the lack of rain for 8 months, the idea that we have so much wilderness around us in the Santa Monica Mountains, which we treasure, probably unavoidable. Was it mitigatable? I definitely think so. There's a lot
Sure.
I think politicians are going to have to answer for.
Yeah, I'm sure there was. I mean, it's always easy to look back, but one of the things too that adds to it is you guys a year or so ago had all those rains, which in California, it was the most rain you guys had in a long time. So that caused all the undergrowth to grow way crazier than normal. Now it's all, already dried and it's a tinderbox.
You are exactly right. When the rains came, we thought, "Ah, wonderful. We've never seen so much
Everything gets green out there. I
lush,
remember.
beautiful, and the
Yeah.
wildflowers. And I think to the uninitiated, or those just not thinking to the future, it was like a sense of complacency. We're getting rain again. We're getting more temperate. Wonderful. Without thinking, wait a minute, if we go dry for a long time, this is going to be 10 times or 100 times worse. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, I don't know when there were ever Santa Ana winds as fast as this was blowing anyways. I mean, growing up there, we always loved to have Santa Ana wind because it blew all the smog out in the ocean, but
Yeah.
this time it's just terrible. It's
I've never
horrible.
seen anything like it, and I have been in LA pretty much since the late '70s, with some breaks to be back on the East Coast because I'm originally an East Coaster. But I have never experienced winds like that.
So back to the feeders. So how often I understand that you're not getting it. So I guess if you're not seeing anybody eating, do you move the feeders to another location?
Hmm.
And that's the first part of the question. Second part is how often on the ones in areas where there may be a lot more wildlife, whatever, is it like a daily thing or how does it work?
That's a good question that I'll have to get back to you to answer. 'Cause I don't I don't honestly know. I do know this: the people who are so conscientious, I know they have the right answer or doing the right thing. That I'm confident about.
I would assume you're probably checking at least daily, and if you get there, one day and it's completely empty, and you get there next day, you're probably checking that one a couple times a day, I would assume, probably. Yeah.
Exactly, and according to how much that the police or the National Guard or the fire department will let us in, because we've got a lot to maneuver. There are roadblocks, and understandably, we got Humvees blocking Sunset Boulevard in places, so
Really?
it's a gauntlet to run.
So, again, because I'm not there, and for everybody that's out there now, are the Palisade fires completely done now?
They are, and I've had pretty much they are. And I had this explained to me by a fire captain, because they always say, you hear on the news 0.0% containment or 8%. You hear 8%, and you think, oh my God, it's been a week and it's only 8%. We are just in dire trouble.
Right.
They explained that containment isn't so much the putting out of the fire. That's not what it's about. It's building a perimeter around the fire.
To keep it from going in there. You're capturing it basically.
Correct. So we're much further along. We feel somewhat out of danger. The fires, when the Palisades started, it was blowing basically, I believe, towards the west, because it went from the mountains of the Palisades to the bluffs, right to the ocean, and up the coast to Malibu, burning the homes of scores of homes of celebrities and everybody else that lived along the beach on both sides of PCH. When a blaze burns right to the ocean's edge, it's apocalyptic. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Then they shifted and started coming east towards Brentwood and West Hollywood and Bel Air and Beverly Hills. And we thought they were going to come down the mountain and get those of us that live right below it. Instead, it started burning the other way, the other side of the mountain towards Encino, and they got evacuated. So
That's in the valley for guys listening.
yeah, that's the San Fernando Valley side. So that seems to be somewhat contained, and the fire has been pretty much burned back on itself, because there's not much more to burn there. But there's always something more to burn, and there's areas that it could start up again. God knows where. It's we are far from out of danger.
So, okay, and so you've done and now are most of your so what you've got 60 feeding stations. Is all the Palisades there? Or are you now up in the Castaic area, or where are you guys?
Yeah, I've got to check in today to see if we've gotten anything done. We brought oxygen masks up to the Castaic area, just south of it, Santa Clarita, Pacoima, Sun Valley, a few days ago. So they are equipped with the masks. Should they need the watering and feed stations, which they probably will, I'm sure we will make an effort to get those out there. A lot of that area is chaparral. I don't know how much wildlife is there,
Right.
but I know we've got experts back in New York, where the Paws of War is headquartered, that are monitoring it. They've got connections everywhere, and they have hotlines into the police and fire department and EMS. So there are a lot of moving parts to this organization, and I'm just one small part of it,
You're the volunteer on the board and just trying to make everything happen.
as best I can.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna use the term cluster, and you can add the other word if you want, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to move as fast as you can because part of the problem you guys have right now is like this the I think they're calling it the Hughes fire, the one in Castaic,
Yeah.
is that just happened out of nowhere. By the way, I read somewhere, and I don't know if that's still the thing, I think weren't are you guys supposed to get some rain like Monday or something like that?
Hopefully, yeah, but there's a terrible danger with that as well.
Mudslides.
Yeah, exactly. Mudslides and the washing of the ash into the drains so that those drains underneath the street are going to be clogged. And the night, we had some major people from Paws of War out here that they flew out to LA to coordinate some of the services that we're doing, or many of the services that we're doing. And the night before she was leaving, I was with her and she got a call. It's Nikki Dawson, who's absolutely phenomenal. And she got a call saying that there were sinkholes happening in the Palisades and we had a vehicle stuck there. So, from inferno to sinkhole to possible mudslides and ash filled drains, we are just looking at a plethora of problems that we're just going to have to face one at a time, or not one at a time, all of them at once. So we are hoping for the rain because that'll damper future fires, but
Right.
it doesn't come without issues.
Yeah, the old catch-22, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know what snafu stands for? It's
Yeah, well, I know what it stands for.
you mentioned cluster blank, and it's also blank with the word show after it. So
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what it is. So, I know you guys do a ton of stuff, but for people that are listening that are in the LA area, how can they help? Um, uh, we'll get into donations, but is there opportunities to volunteer to go to these feeders? What's available for people to support you? Are other I know you got one thing we did not talk about, so before we get there is you guys are also helping people find different rescue shelters if they're trying to find their animal in that too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk about how everybody can help.
Well, the city has set up, a couple of several places for animals. Everything from goats to horses to dogs to cats, you name it. That are at it's by the West LA Recreation Center, which is not far from where I live. There's one in the valley at Pierce College. But if they go to the Paws of War website, they will find information for a animal hotline that can help them locate their animal if their animal is missing and they want to check on it and see if we can help locate it. Um, it's good for almost all of the questions or ways they might want to help, from looking for their animal to being able to volunteer to donations to everything. We have people waiting and really, really hoping to hear from people. We could use every volunteer and every bit of help we can get.
Okay, so let's focus on that a little bit. So, for everybody listening, so you can volunteer, and the best way to do that right now is to go to the website. By the way, Paws of War, is it .org or .com?
.org.
Okay, so and by the way, it'll be in the description. We're recording today; it'll be out on Tuesday. This is Thursday before that. But if you go there, you'll find it on pawsofwar.org. And so there's a list of volunteers. So when you talk about volunteers, is it across the board different things, or is there specific things that generally go?
Everything possibly from maybe fostering to maybe monitoring to helping in transport. As the situation evolves, there's a different need every 5 minutes.
Right, exactly. And you guys are always one step. You're trying to be one step ahead of it, but then you'd end up being two steps behind it. I'm sure.
Exactly.
Cool.
The Springsteen song was that two steps forward, one step back.
Yep, exactly. And so if they can't volunteer and they're not in the LA area and all that, I know you guys, if you go on the website, something pops up every 3 seconds of somebody donating. So can you talk a little bit about that
Yeah,
and or even supplies or whatever that may be?
yeah. I would go to that. We're a nonprofit. Every single cent goes to the animals. This is not a profit bearing institution. It's just a lot of good people putting their hearts and souls into this. So if they can afford to donate, it could be 50 cents or $5,000 or how much ever anybody can afford. we'd be really, really grateful for their help. The need is great. People aren't being paid. It's just going for supplies, for transport, for veterinary services, for whatever might needed that we have to pay. And veterinarians have been really helpful as much as they can. They're overloaded, but there are vets that are taking in some of the smoke damaged animals, but the weight is huge. So we're also moving animals from local shelters to other shelters to make room for animals that we need
Sure.
to put into shelters. So there's a big need for transport people. People just willing to take a cage with a cat in it or a dog or whatever it might be and bring it from one location to another. Usually locally, it could be a certain radius of miles. We just don't know until it depends on the case.
And then I guess some of the donations too. I mean, can you donate like are you guys taking any like product kind of stuff or leashes or food or just money is a better thing than getting that? What do you guys do you own?
Probably always the best thing because we could probably get it. I'm sure we're probably taking most everything. I have to double check on the website because that hasn't been my area of focus. But
Sure.
money always helps best because then we can allot it to where the need is greatest.
Yeah, and again, I guess some of it's buying food for the feeders. It's as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So what are we missing? Have we covered everything? Can you think of anything else that we haven't covered?
I just want to let people know that, before this fire happened and we turned our attention, we've been to the floods we've mentioned in Texas and the hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina, um, and now LA fires. But just prior to this, Paws of War has been a presence in the Ukraine since that war started. They were asked right after the war started to get a cat out for an American soldier who was there right before the Russians invaded. And we realized that people were leaving their cats and dogs behind because the buses and the vehicles wouldn't let them take their pets with them.
Right.
So we jumped right into action at the Poland border. We helped with that, and we've been building feeding stations for stray dogs and cats ever since. And on the 25th of this month, we're holding a spay and neutering clinic in Ukraine on the streets to spay and neuter over 250 animals so we don't add more to the problem of that ongoing tragedy in Ukraine. So we're global, we're national, we're regional, we're local.
You're going wherever there's a need to be able to help these animals. Like I mentioned when we first talked, I was in Ukraine 6 months into the war, and some of the crazy stuff that's there because people had to flee because there were bombs going off and that, and bomb goes off, and just like you and I at home with fireworks, or if we don't have our animals inside, they'll take off running because they're scared, and then you've got to evacuate. You can't find your animal. You got to save your family too. So they're out there.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'm sure I don't know if they're getting that there, but the Russians planted a lot of landmines, and a lot of these animals are stepping in these mines and getting injured that way as well.
Yeah, and not to mix images too much, although this one really does. It's a Hobson's choice with the sword of Damocles hanging over us.
It's crazy. So, again, for everybody that's listening, pawsofwar.org, that's a real important one to get there and do these things. So these guys can continue doing it. There's the fires in LA, but there's all these other disasters or whatever happens at different times. So you guys are doing great things. And, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I just want your audience to know that if the fires in LA are not the top story because there's something else bloodier or gory or whatever that leads to news, I've been in news for a long time. So, that old thing about if it bleeds, it leads. If we're not the top story, it doesn't mean that anything is better or the need has dissipated. Keep your eyes on the issue.
Yeah, all the thing. If there's animals involved, it all has a value to you guys. And by the way, I'm going to disagree with you. You said you guys don't profit anything with the money. Of course you don't, but you do profit by the gratitude and your heart gets bigger. So you are getting some kind of profit.
By that measure, we are incredibly wealthy.
You're the most profitable guys in the podcast right now. At the end of the day. Okay, so not to make light of it, we're at that part in the time where we tell the silly animal joke, and I know you weren't going to do one, so I have one for you.
Okay.
And as everybody that's listening, to forewarn you, if you haven't heard it before, these are the worst jokes ever told, and I'm always looking for somebody who will volunteer. So if you've got a grandchild, a child, a niece, nephew, or whatever, or you want to be on the show and tell a joke. Because clearly, when you hear this, you're going to know there are better jokes out there. Please send me an email at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. And I promise you, I'll do anything to have somebody else tell a joke. Anyways, so Robin, here's the joke. What did one flea say to the other flea?
I'll bite.
No, that's a pretty good response. No. So do you want to walk or take a dog? Okay, there it is. Like I said, everybody, they're terrible. I cringe every time I do it.
I'm going to add one little thing to that. It's another poem. I think it's the shortest poem in history by a comic poet named Ogden Nash. And he said, the name of the poem is Ode to the Antiquity of Fleas. And the line is, Adam had 'em.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And I got to remember that. Matter of fact, I'm going to write it down. I love him. Adam had him. I get it. For you guys who don't get it, then you got to definitely call and help both of us here. Also, please keep following and all that stuff. Pass the word off. This story is a story that needs to get out. I mean, the more people that can listen, and awesome, everybody's got big hearts out there to take care of animals. So this is a great way that you guys can be supporting, LA, wherever it is, North Carolina, wherever there's something going on, these guys are going to be there. But first off, Robin, thanks so much for being on. I really, really appreciate it. I know you guys are jammed and, like a chicken with a head cut off trying to keep up with everything. And I really, really do appreciate it. So thanks for being on.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity to get the word out.
Well, I'm just glad to have you. And then for everybody else who's out there listening, again, really, from the bottom of my heart, really thanks for listening and participating. It really means a lot to me. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.